talk about our purpose and why we are here first. And let's get started with that, and then we're going to do intros. So first off, let's go over the agenda for the presentation today. And as you all know, this is probably going to be one of the most important things that we do during this global pandemic and trying to open or reopen our schools in whatever capacity it's going to be in the next couple of months. But today's agenda, we're going to do our opening and our mission. We're going to go through some guiding questions, and as I mentioned before, do some introductions of our members, an overview of our planning process, and then we're going to get into some group discussion and go through some guiding questions as a team, and then we will have some debriefing and talk about our next steps as we move forward. So let's talk a little bit about our purpose and why we are actually here. This is something that is very innovative and different for us. Typically we're always establishing what we call these committees. And we said, we need to do something a little differently. Oh, is the slide going forward? There you go. Thank you.
There you go.
We said that we wanted to do something a little differently than just establishing a committee. We really wanted to establish, some thought partners or a group of experts, in our city who have expertise in different areas than education to really help us as we move forward with this. We're going to have to really get some specific guidance on how do we reopen our schools in the next couple of months. And it's not just about how we deliver instruction, but also, how do we ensure that we have safety? How do we make sure that the health and the well-being of our students and our staff are a top priority, and that we're putting all of that into perspective when we are making our decisions for this reopening of our schools. We also think that, it's so important for us to promote, these high levels of achievement for our students, especially since our doors closed on March 13th. Our staff has done a remarkable job with making sure that, our students have been, engaged in asynchronous and synchronous learning, but it's not a replication of face-to-face instruction. And, it's going to be important for us to really come up with some plans to hopefully help our students to get up to par and to, decrease some of the learning loss that is occurring during this particular time. These are some guiding questions, and this is specific guiding questions for our thought partners, and there are 8 guiding questions. We wanted to chunk them, so we have 3 meetings. We're gonna go through 3 of the guiding questions today. We're gonna go through 3 at our next meeting, and then we're gonna have the final 2 at our final meeting. And these guiding questions are really gonna help our planning teams, which I'll talk a little bit about later on today, with the work that we are trying to accomplish in regards to establishing these action plans for reopening. But these are questions that we really want you as thought partners to ponder and to begin to really think through. We hope that you will be able to talk with some of your constituency groups or some staff members or your colleagues that you might work with, just to get their insight and pick their brains. So when we're coming back as a thought partner group, you're able to share some of the information that you have heard and specifics in regards to these questions as we move along. So we're getting multiple perspectives. So in a sense, you're being a messenger of some of these key responses to these guiding questions. But we'll talk more specifically, and today's activity really is about the first 3 guiding questions. And Dr. Mozingo, our Chief Academic Officer, will walk us through that a little later on in the presentation today. So let's get to some introductions. I think it's important for us to know, most of us know us all, most of us know each other, on this Zoom. But I do think it is important for us just to take a moment to say your name and the position that you currently serve in. And we're going to get through everyone, and we'll start right at the top where we see Alexandria Health Department, and we'll just work our way across and then go back So we're work our way across and go to the next line and work our way across that way. So let's start with the Alexandria Health Director.
Hi, good morning. Steve Herring, Director of Alexandria Health Department. Honored to be a part of this group.
Thanks,
Good morning.
Dr. Herring.
Good morning, Tammy Mann, President and CEO at the Companion Center. Similar sentiments as Dr. Herring spoke.
Good morning, Mark Jenks, City Manager.
Good morning. Okay, we're going to go over the Department of Community and Human Services.
Sorry, Kate Garvey. I'm the Director of the Department of Community and Human Services.
Oh, hello, Kate.
Good morning, Lori Morris, the Brune Morris Family Foundation.
Hello, Lori.
Good morning, Dave Millard, Chair of the Chamber of Commerce and a past Chair of Compania Center. I'm very happy to see my friend Tammy on the call.
Thanks, Dave.
Justin Wilson, friend of Greg Hutchins.
And our wonderful mayor.
Annette Hagray, Provost for the Alexandria campus of Northern Virginia Community College. I'm also pleased to see a lot of friends in this conversation this morning.
Thanks, Dr. Hagray. I'm Greg Hutchins, Superintendent of Schools.
Stephen Wilkins, Chief of Staff, and also filling in for Human Resources. Over to Terry.
And I'm Terry Mazingo, the Chief Academic Officer. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Julie Crawford, Chief of Student Services, Alternative Programs, and Equity.
Hi, I'm Katie Matthews. I'm the PTA Council President.
Good morning.
Good morning, Clint.
I'm here, sorry. Clint Page, Chief Accountability Officer and part-time daddy daycare operator. So I'm on my phone today, so I can't see the order in which we're going. But good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Elizabeth Hoover, Chief Technology Officer.
Good morning, Cindy Anderson, School Board Chair.
Here's Cindy.
Good morning, everybody. This is Dominic Turner, Chief Financial Officer.
Good morning. My name is Dawn Lucas. I'm a special education teacher in ACPS, as well as the president of the Education Association of Alexandria.
Oh, yay. Our elementary, middle, and high school principals. We start with elementary.
Okay, good morning. I'm Brianne Johnson, the 2020 Principal of the Year. And elementary principal to James K. Polk Elementary School, been in the school division for 35 years.
Oh, Brianne.
Good morning, everyone. I am Pierrette Peters. I'm the principal of Francis C. Hammond Middle School.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Peter Ballas, principal of T.C. Williams High School.
Our chief of school and community relations, she had another meeting, but I believe that our communications director is on this call. Helen?
That's right. Good morning, everyone. I'm standing in for Julia Burgos, who will be representing us in the next couple of meetings.
Good morning, Gerald Mann, Executive Director of Secondary Instruction.
We have our elementary staff, middle school staff, and then high school staff.
Good morning, I'm Ashley Sandoval. I'm a physical education teacher at Core Cali Elementary.
And teacher of the year.
And teacher of the year.
For 2020.
Say so, say so.
Thank you.
Middle school staff.
Good morning, my name is Dottie DeMuse. I'm the math instructional coach at George Washington Middle School.
Danita.
Good morning, I'm Ben Hammond, Program Coordinator for the International Academy at T.C. Williams. Honored to be a part of this group.
And good to see you, Ben. So as you all can see, we have a pretty diverse group, diverse perspectives at the table. And this is going to be very important for us because it is going to require an entire community to make this all happen. and to make it work. One, thank you all for saying yes and for being here this morning. I know that this is very important. So I'm hoping that's the reason why we got 100% commitment from all of the people we did ask to be a part of the START partnership. So let's move on to the next slide and really get into some of the overview of our work. If you're not familiar with this, you will be by the end of the next couple of weeks. We have gone through this journey since we closed our doors on March 13th due to the COVID-19 global pandemic. And we started with our 1.0 continuity of learning plan, which initially we thought was only going to take us through, spring break, and that we would be back in school and everything will be back to normal. And little did we know that we would be developing a 2.0 continuity of learning plan, which when the governor made the executive order to close our schools for the rest of the academic year, we needed to have a plan of how we were going to continue our learning process for our students. And our staff have been doing a remarkable job with our 2.0 continuity of learning plan. Recently, we just launched our 3.0 continuity of summer learning plan. There's some misinformation that was out there from Alex Now and Channel 9. I'm putting you all out there on blast because you all did not use appropriate language. And I told them that already because we never said that summer learning was mandatory. We did say it was expected, but the word mandatory just sounds so aggressive. But I think that was the point that they wanted to make, which caused a flood of emails in my mailbox due to that error on their part. That was not necessarily an error because it was on purpose. But our summer learning plan 3.0 specifically focuses on how we engage our students this summer. And it is an expectation for our students to be a part of our summer learning in July. This is from July 6th through July 30th. But parents do have an option to opt out. And one of the reasons why we really wanted to have an expectation that students participate in the summer learning is because one, it is asynchronous and synchronous learning, meaning some the material is recorded and some of the material is live if you choose. So you really have some options and flexibility. We also wanted to make it so that kids could go at their own pace. So this is a self-paced process. And because it is completely online, you can go to another country and your child can still be engaged in this experience. And then it also affords our young people opportunities to kind of get ahead. So if you wanted to go and look at, let's say you were in 5th grade and you wanted to see what middle school and high school is all about, go look at some of that middle school and high school videos to get a chance to see what middle school and high school courses or coursework is like. And we really think that this is groundbreaking for us. Summer learning really should be free and it should be open to all students anyway. Our history has been only to focus on targeted groups and specifically EL students, students with special needs, as well as students who are performing below grade level. But all kids experience summer loss. And this will be an opportunity for us to start, setting a new culture in Alexandria City Public Schools. But won't get too much into 3.0, but I think it is important for you all to understand what 3.0 and 2.0 and 1.0 are all about, because now we're going to use some lessons learned from these 3 plans to create our 4.0, which we will be talking about today, and that's reimagining our schools. I'm going to the next slide. So a part of our systemic decision-making in regards to how do we even think about reopening our schools and how do we even think about providing any type of learning for our students remotely or in some of these situations that I'm going to talk about really soon with you. And there are 4 specific areas that we needed to focus on. And this is some of the reasons why people who have been asked to be a part of the START partnership were invited to the table. One specifically is looking at the public health and the wellness and safety, as well as the academics of our students. I mean, that is probably the top number one priority, for us. We have to make sure that our students are healthy and our staff are healthy. We need to make sure that we're providing a safe learning environment for them. And we need to ensure that they're continuing to be able to learn, whether it's during the pandemic or when our doors reopen or beyond. That is the business that we're in. We're in the business of teaching and learning. So that's our number one priority. We also have to look at our community partnerships, because it is going to require us to look beyond our school division and how to make this work in regards to reimagining and reopening our schools. One thing I've said time and time again is that we are not going to be able to go back to how things were. And honestly, we shouldn't strive to go back to how things were, because when prior to this, global pandemic, we were not serving 100% of our students. Right. So us saying we want to go back to how things were, we're going back to continue to not serve 100% of our students. So we need to use this moment as an opportunity to open, our eyes to just something different and really reimagine what our schools can be, so that we can serve every single one of our students and be proud of who we are as a school division, and to know that all of our students' needs are being met. But that is going to require community partnerships, and not just our educators. We have to look at our financial, issues and concerns. As you all know, we've had a budget shortfall. We hope that things will continue to open up and we will see the economy, have an uptick at some point. But we have to put this into consideration in regards to our financial issues, specifically around how do we fund reopening our schools. Excuse me. And then also, how do we, as a school division, maintain the high quality instruction that, our kids deserve and that we want to continue to keep them engaged in. And then finally is our communications efforts, and in making sure that we are, one, keeping our students and our families, as well as our staff members, informed around what our plans are, and making sure that the right message is out there. I just used the example of Alex Now and, Channel 9, with some of the things that they did purposefully to try to get, people riled up about summer learning. We're going to have to make sure that we're telling our narrative and we're getting ahead of any outside organizations or social media or news outlets, so that we're telling our story and we're being able to, inform our community around what our plans are and how we plan to, to implement these continuity of learning plans. So we have two separate groups that are going to be working simultaneously and honestly collaboratively as well. So this right here is our thought partner group that you all are a part of. In addition to our thought partner group, we also have our planning work groups. And the leads of our planning work groups are also on this call today. So you will see at the beginning when we were introducing our ACPS staff, a lot of our ACPS staff, or many of them, will be leading the planning work groups. And these are cross-functional planning work teams. It's so important that we talk about cross-functional, because we do not want people working in silos, especially at this particular time. This is the time of collaboration, of teamwork, and we were very intentional about using certain, words to describe what we're doing as we reopen our schools or reimagine opening our schools. The 5 specific cross-functional planning work teams include our SEAL, or social, emotional, and academic learning. So that's one core team that is going to be specifically focusing on curriculum and instruction and accountability, professional learning for staff, student services for our students, such as social and emotional needs being met, as well as technology, which right now is our lifeline during this global pandemic. The other planning work team deals with our human and our capital resources. So this, even though we're going through a pandemic, we still have capital needs that have to be addressed. We're building Douglas MacArthur. We're building another building for the high school project. We have a number of roof projects and water led, so many things that we have that still are happening that we are going to have to work through. And those are points that we're going to need to really discuss so that we can develop these action plans, as well as human resources, because whether you notice or not, we just hired 3 principals, during a pandemic. We've done Zoom community interviews. We're conducting interviews to fill executive director positions and teacher positions that still need to be filled, as we continue to grow through this pandemic. So we really need a planning team that's going to help us to work through those action plans. We also have a health and safety group that will be specifically looking at, how we're going to maintain our facilities. The CDC has issued new guidelines in regards to cleaning and maintenance. We're going to have to, understand about our personal protective equipment, or PPE, for staff and students, and what that looks like, and how do we make sure we have it equipped for all. Our school nutrition piece is going to be so important for us, because right now we're serving meals to our students. We've served 300,000 meals already since March 13th to our students. Security, and then also transportation, and how do we work through reopening our schools with social distancing and social gathering guidelines, and what does transportation look like? What does the cafeteria look like? What do our classrooms look like? All those things we're going to have to work through. And then the fourth area is our financial management. And this really focuses on our budget and our payroll and our procurement, because all those things are still happening, even though we are in a global pandemic. We still have bills to pay. We still have checks to write for our staff members, and we still have to procure different projects that are happening within our school division. And we really need to have an action plan on how we continue to do that most efficiently and effectively. And then finally is our school and community relations. And this area is so important because it does require us making sure that we're communicating out appropriately and effectively and timely, so that everyone is getting key messages around what we are planning to do, and that everyone understands what our next moves are, so that they don't have to come up with their own scenarios and fill in the blanks, on our behalf. We also need to make sure we're engaging our community. It's so important that our underrepresented communities in particular, and those are most times our families who are immigrants or are English learners, our low-income families who typically don't have a seat at the table and who don't have a voice and may not be in the know as to what we're doing. We have to ensure that we're doing that engagement, so that regardless of where you live, regardless of your family circumstance, that you are informed about how we are operating as a school division. And then our partnerships are going to be key, because as I said earlier, we cannot do this work alone. It does take an entire village. This just gives you an idea of some of the guidance and the reopening of our school models. We're really looking at 3 approaches to reopening our schools. We've developed 4 models for that. The 3 approaches, which are not mentioned right here, I'm just going to run them through you. The 3 approaches to opening school is either doing a traditional opening, meaning how we typically open our schools, which probably won't happen, in September, but that way. But we want to make sure that we're prepared in case we are opening as normal. The other approach to reopening our schools is a hybrid approach, meaning there's some traditional, meaning some in-school, and also some form of distance learning. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. And then the third approach is completely online. So we're looking at a traditional, meaning everybody arrives back in school, a hybrid approach, which is having a mix of, traditional and online, and then a completely online approach. And that allowed us to develop these 4 models, which the 2 hybrid approaches, you're already familiar with 1 and 4. 1 is how we traditionally open, 4 is what we're currently doing right now. But the 2 other models, Model 2 and Model 3, we're specifically looking at what would reopening, what would we have to do in regards to our action planning to reopen our buildings with 50% of our kids in them. And the number 50% is to try to live up to the social gathering and the social distancing guidelines. There's no way our schools that are majority overcrowded already that we could fulfill those expectations with all of our kids in them. So we're going to need to look at a model as, could it work at 50%? Could we still be able to live up to those expectations, social gathering and social distancing guidelines? And then also at a 25% of our students in our schools, would that be something that is doable and effective and appropriate for us to be able to conduct learning? What our teams are going to have to do, our planning teams, they're going to have to really figure out in these two specific scenarios, what would that look like for us? Would that be staggered starts? Would that be certain kids come on certain days of the week? We're going to have to really work through what does that scenario look like so that we're able to then communicate that out to our staff as well as our families so that everybody is understanding how this process is going to be able to work as we move forward. These are just some guiding principles for all the work that we're doing. I think it's important for us to just have, in a sense, like core values that we all share. We were very intentional about looking at research with these guiding principles. We have looked at a number of sources. Some of them we've already shared with you. We're going to be sharing some others with you. We're going to also provide you all with summaries so that you don't have to read those full documents if you choose not to, but I know some of you love to read. But we will give you summaries of these as well. But we want to continue to have the equitable access, right? I mean, regardless of whether we're in a global pandemic or not, we still need to keep equity at the forefront for us. And that doesn't mean that everything is equal. That means that we're going to meet students where they are, not necessarily where we want them to be, and give them the additional services or resources that they might need for their situation. We need to ensure that our families and our parents and our students, that their voices are heard. And that is all of our families. It cannot be the traditional people or families that have been able to speak out. We're going to have intentional efforts to make sure that everybody's voice is being heard. And we're going to have to study all the lessons that we've learned, with our continuity of 1, 2, and 3, so that we're not repeating the same mistakes. We might make new mistakes in the future, but we don't want to have a repeat of any challenges that we experienced previously. So we're going to have to really do that. We're going to have to coordinate and collaborate with the city and all of the individuals who are on this call today, or this Zoom today. We're going to have to build trust with our community as well as with our staff. I think that we are at a place now where we have gained a lot more trust than we've had in the past, especially with our transition into going completely online. But we're going to have to continue that. And we're going to have to embrace the flexibility. And I always say that we need to have grace as well, because these are unprecedented times right now. And there's so many uncertainties and so many things that are unpredictable. Every week there's something different or new information that we're receiving. And we got to be willing to be a little flexible and not stuck in our ways and say, but that's how we said we're going to do it, so we got to do it that way. We have to make adjustments when necessary. And then finally, we have to be very clear, consistent, and frequent in our communications. People say over communicating is key, especially at times like this. This is one of the reasons why we're doing our ACPS Express on Mondays and Wednesdays, and we're doing videos on Tuesdays and Thursdays to keep everybody informed, right? I know people are tired of seeing my face on those videos, but it's our job to make sure we're constantly informing our community, and that over communication and frequent communication is key for us at this time. And then finally, these are just some reopening considerations that we're going to have to look at. And I know I'm giving a lot to you all right now, right? So, this is normally not a sit and get, but I know our time is limited. So I want to get through this so you will have some context when we get into our questions that you're going to be able to engage a lot more in. But these are specific reopening considerations that we have to look at. And I shared some of these with my comments earlier, but those 4 specific areas are risks to, public health. If we open our buildings, there potentially we can have a resurgence of infection among our students. We need to talk to our health department to get input on how do we make sure that this works? How do we keep in contact? Which, let me just say, Dr. Herring and his team, you all are amazing. right? You have been keeping us well informed in our community, but how do we make sure we continue to determine when is it appropriate for us to possibly reclose, or when is the appropriate time to reopen? You know, all of those conversations we're going to need to have. The importance of economic activity and understanding that some of our families, you know, and this is why Dr. Mann is on this call, some of our families, they still need childcare services. You know, they have to work. Their livelihood is depending on them having some form of childcare for their child over the summer and during the year. So complete distance learning, it might not be good for everyone. So what are going to be some things that we look at to make accommodations for people who just have to work and their kids can't be home alone? Impacts on student learning, which I talked about, and then also just our readiness. You know, are we ready to mitigate, you know, some of the risk? Are we going to have our health screening stations? How are we going to take temperatures of our students and our staff every single day before they enter our building? How are we going to ensure people don't come to school sick? You know, all of these things are going to be things that we're going to need to really talk through, so we're prepared when, you know, we reopen in the next few months. So I'm going to transition and turn things over to Dr. Mozingo to talk a little bit about our reopening planning timeline, and then we're going to get right into our discussion from the team.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Hutchins. We purposely wanted to ensure that you had a sense of the scope of work and the deliverables for reopening the school division. So on this slide, what you actually see, we start with the meeting today, the thought partner meetings. There will be 3 meetings, as he mentioned earlier, and we'll tell you a little bit more about those, but we wanted you to go ahead and have the dates for those thought partner meetings. Then we also have established a window for the planning work teams. For those teams, we'll have a kickoff meeting with the co-chairs and their teams, and then they have that time frame to work. And we're moving towards a school board meeting on June the 26th. And the goal is to be able to synthesize and share some of your thinking and ideas and an initial framework at that school board meeting. And then you'll see that the work teams will have a couple of dates, July 14th and the 30th, to prepare their draft action plans or reports. Our goal is to develop and have prepared a comprehensive, hopefully reopening report in August. We did say subject to change, just given some things that might occur, but this does provide for you for planning in your schedules, given your busy schedules, the reopening timeline. Now what we want to do is to begin, this is great, we'll begin the discussion activity. And I want to kind of explain this discussion activity, and you'll have some people join me in facilitating. We're going to engage in a process that's called an inner circle and an outer circle. And what that means is that we want our 8 city thought partners, we really want you, as Dr. Hutchins said earlier, to ponder your responses to the 3 questions on this slide. Given your expertise, your knowledge, your experience, we really want you to be engaged in responding to these questions, because your feedback will guide the direction of the school division. In addition to that, the ACPS team, we will operate as the outer circle, right? And so our goal today is to listen and to learn from you as you discuss and share your responses to each of these questions. Again, as the outer circle, just today, we're observing and listening as you delve into each of the questions. We want you to be aware that the session is being recorded. We also have 2 individuals, John Brown and Sahar Wilshire, recording and taking notes so we can have a memory of, you know, what is occurring. We also have Veronica, who's working with and also taking notes. Now, what I'm going to do at this time, I want Emily Dillard to just explain the format for how we're going to operate, and then we'll begin to facilitate your internal discussion and responses to these 3 questions.
All right, good morning, everyone. So we will be working through this discussion activity, 1 question at a time. During that time, I'll read the question out loud, and then we want this to be, like Dr. Mozingo said, an opportunity for ACPS staff to listen So for our friends from the city that are on the call, this will be primarily a vocal discussion. So if you have some insight, or if you would like to add to the discussion, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom. If you're on a laptop, at the bottom of your screen, you should see the ability to click for your list of participants. And once you do that, you'll see an option to raise your hand. If you're on a mobile device, you should see that option somewhere on your screen to raise your hand. Once you have provided your response, Dr. Mazinga will be calling on names. Once you've provided your response, go ahead and lower your hand so that we know that you have had an opportunity to speak, and then you can raise it again if you have some additional input. For the chat function, we'll be using that primarily for you to either confirm your agreement to a response, or if you have a need for some clarification on a response or anything of that nature, you can use the chat function for that, and we'll be monitoring that as well. So if there aren't any questions, we will go ahead and begin with discussion question number 1. In your opinion, what did the city and school division do well in response to the COVID-19 crisis? All right. We have Mr. Jinks.
I think the school did an extraordinary job of being ready, of having a plan in place, and having technology that at least externally, we always know technology internally is always messy, but externally it seemed to work very well. So I think that was something done extraordinarily well by the schools.
Thank you.
You raise your hand?
Yes. Ms. Morris?
It's Matthews. Is that Katie?
Yeah.
Katie's raised her hand.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to raise the hand.
That's okay. You can.
Sorry, I'm in class. So the PTAs actually talked about this the past week and a half. And we actually came up with a list of to answer this question, and I don't want to waste people's time to go through like 10 things. So do you just want me to send that in via or put that in the chat? I just don't want to waste people's time.
So you can just send that, so you won't have to put it in the chat. You can send it in an email to me, and then we're going to copy all of this and transcribe it and send it back out to everybody. Thank you so much.
Perfect, because we have both great things and then things that just needs improvement. So I'll just send that to you.
Very good, very good.
Okay, great.
I think we have Laurie Morris has her hand raised.
Yep, thank you. I think FACE did an amazing job of reaching out to the communities. I know they were working super hard to get to the communities that are more difficult to reach. So well done on that. The tech and getting the hotspots out to people seemed incredible. I have to say, from what I could understand with Fairfax versus Alexandria, we were sort of rock stars on that front. So, thank you, Elizabeth, for all your hard work on that. And the communication seemed really constant. So I don't have a child in the school, as most of you know, but, I get the communication. So I signed up, or people forwarded to me, and I thought, in general, just constant and really excellent. So even I knew what was going on. So I'm interested, but still, I'm not in the inner circle really. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I think we have Ms. Kate Garvey has her hand raised.
Yeah, I would also say the focus on food, the approach that was taken was wonderful, both thinking about how to get it out, how to get it delivered, just thinking through what's really necessary for families and why it was such a priority. And it was really impressive, something I've talked about with others from across the country. Great job.
Thank you. Dr. Hagray has her hand raised.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate what Lori was saying. The communications interagency was really good. ACPS has not been shy about asking questions. And I think there has been really good communications to the public as well. The other is really being clear about the priorities from the inception or the first awareness of the pandemic, that safety and health was a priority.
Thank you so much, Dr. Herring. And now I think Dr. Hagray had some comments.
Yes, while I certainly don't have the perspective that those of you who were actually, who are part of the school system have, just from my observation, it seemed to have gone very well. It just seemed like you all had a good plan, you executed well, and the communication, from what I can tell, just reading what I could read and seeing what I could see, and while I don't have children in the system, certainly I work with folks who do, but overall, I think people really felt that safety concerns were paramount, and quickly to implement the plan was taken very seriously. So I think you all did a great job from what I could tell.
Thank you. Are there any other hands raised to respond to question 1?
We do have a response in the chat.
Oh, good. Okay.
If you were unable to raise your hand, you can go ahead and speak now.
Yeah, this is Tammy Mann. I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand, but at least with the raised hand, I've seen it before, but I'm not finding it. But at any rate, I will say that what I appreciate about even the way the question is phrased in the slide, it talks about what the city and the division did well. And I really feel like there was a concerted effort, not just, I echo everything people said about what the school did very, very well in this process, but I think overall there was an extraordinary spirit of collaboration with the city and many partners as well as the school. I think the weekly meetings that Kate Garvey hosts for the community to come together and make certain that families are aware of where resources live, whether it was related to food, financial support, you name it. I just felt like there was an incredible level of collaboration to ensure that families in our city were being served during this very, very difficult time. And that was a very strengthening part of kind of soldiering through this moment. So I just want to make sure I put that in the mix.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else with their hand raised, or I'm reading the chat? Okay.
We have Ben Hammond and Dr. Wilkins as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to say from a staff perspective, at least my perspective, it seemed like the response was really rapid. And from a staffing perspective, the communication was very clear, consistent, and comprehensive. That kind of phased rollout of what our expectations were. And it really seemed like staff was working together, echoing some earlier comments on coordinating. And I was really impressed by that rollout.
Yeah, Dr. Wilkins here. I just want to underscore Mark's great work and the city's great work on use of the EOC system as a base structure for communication and coordination and collaboration. This was my first experience working with the EOC team. I thought it was a very strong and seamless process, and enjoyed participating. And obviously we had school reps on each of the subcommittees. So as a structure for communication, I thought that, again, the city's process was superb. Thank you.
Okay, Emily, I think we're good with question 1 and responses. I think we can go to question 2 for our city thought partners to respond.
If it's okay, we did have one additional hand from the mayor, if you would like.
Oh, yeah. We want the mayor to speak.
Thank you very much. You know, I agree with everything that was said. I think we moved quickly to transition. We have stayed committed to addressing all the needs of our kids, which has been great. Our educators have gone above and beyond to support kids. Technology was absolutely critical. I think one of in the collaboration, I think, as Dr. Mann mentioned, the collaboration between city and schools was better than I've ever seen. I think one of the things that also, and I want to try not to be negative about other folks here, but it is an interesting contrast with what other jurisdictions were going through. And I think one of the lessons I take from that is a very positive here is that we made decisions and executed. They probably weren't all, we didn't address every problem. We weren't 100% perfect from the first try, but we made a decision, we executed it, and then we learned from what we messed up on the first time, and we made it better the second time, and we kept improving. And we didn't wait to make sure it was 100% perfect before we executed. And I think that was, particularly in an emergency, is really key, where make the best decisions with the information you have, move ahead, and then just keep improving. It's an iterative process. And I think we did a good job of doing that.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And so those are all the hands that we have for question 1. So thank you everyone that was very smooth. So we'll continue with the process for question 2. And if you are at a point where you find yourself unable to raise your hand, please say so in the chat and we'll make sure to let your voice be heard. So discussion question 2, what modifications or additions would you recommend? What are the positive and negative implications for school reopening in the fall?
So we'll give you about 30 seconds to reflect on that second question, and then we'll have our thought partners respond. Okay, are we ready?
I think so.
Okay. This is a very important question because we're trying to get at what needs to change, what should be improved, what needs to change and what needs to be improved, as the mayor indicated. So what are some lessons learned that we wouldn't repeat in 4.0?
Well, I'll
see Brianne.
Oh, go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say, as an employer, and not as an employer with a lot of employees in the city, but I think this goes for any employer, is having a consistency of schedule and knowing what's coming, because as was mentioned earlier by Dr. Hutchings, we have a lot of employees, and every employer does, who have school-age kids at home, and therefore knowing what the schedules are, maybe having the schedules consistent, so it's like every other week or exactly a certain number of days, so that parents and employers can then know well ahead exactly what the kind of the rhythm of attendance will be, so that we can figure out the other side of it is what do we do in regards to those days when the kids are at home.
Yeah, I would say related to that, as we're going forward, and I think particularly if there's a hybrid approach, is there a way to use school facilities to address the needs of community members and parents? I think the positive implications of reopening are absolutely, having students engaged and having the opportunity to make up the losses that they've suffered already, and for them to be connected. The challenge is, maintaining a safe environment, of course, but I do think that for families with fewer resources, the impact is so profound, both on the students as well as the family, the pressure on the family, especially if people are working. So I think it's sort of thinking through what's possible. And again, as you said already, that it has to be done through partnerships. And for us to sort of be taking a look at each school community and say, what is the impact if this is not available? What else is available within the community to be responsive? But I think it's really critical that we do open, but we open smart, just as you're doing, as you guys do everything. But
thank you.
I saw Dr. Hackray, and I also see Brianne Johnson's hand up. I don't know if you all can see those.
I can't see the hands.
This is Annette. I just, I'm not close enough to, I think, be able to offer a lot of meaningful feedback about modifications and additions. But I did pose a question, and that was about feedback from those who've had to work with this, you know, the teachers and the staff and even parents, if you've heard feedback that might inform that question. So I would just put that out there. But it is, as it relates to positive implications for reopening, I do believe that for some students and parents, it would be stabilizing to bring students back to school in one form or another, providing some sense of what is coming for the future, and being able to reconnect with folks who are there every day to make a difference in their lives. Certainly the negatives have to do with just fear. I think still there's quite, you know, there are folks who are concerned about what it means to be back in a public space and how will they protect their children, and whether or not the school has in place all of those safety measures that will be important for maintaining integrity of the healthcare for the and safety for the students and staff and the teachers. I think the other piece was talked about earlier, just, you know, there are folks struggling with childcare, with job issues, and with healthcare, a lot of life issues that will make it difficult for them to be supportive in trying to ensure that their students do well in school. So that also contributes, I think, to that loss we talked about earlier, Dr. Hutchins. How is it that the family can be supported to be able to help the student to come back and to be successful in their learning when they do come back? So I think that's all a part of that mix of the implications on the side about reopening.
Thank you so much. Priyan Johnson, I see your hand raised.
As far as the modifications and additions, I think we sort of answered that in question one, that I think we did a really good job of finding out what was right, finding out what was wrong, and making those changes. So I think for that, we just need to stay the course of keeping that line of communication open, and the ability to continuously change. The negative implications that I wanted to just bring up is there are some parents who, even if we feel it's safe to reopen in certain ways, there is some families or communities that will simply not want to return to school if return to school is an option. So even if the option is to return to school, there are some who will feel reluctant about that, and we probably need to kind of consider what we could do for those who simply are not in a place emotionally where they can return.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Jinks has his hand raised.
I do not have anything to add.
Oh, you don't have anything to add. Okay, thank you.
And I believe those are all the hands raised.
This is Katie Matthews.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand. I would just say a number of things I agree with, what was just said, so I won't repeat, but maybe I also would really like to reiterate the keeping children on the particular student on a schedule. I found, like, as a parent, once my children got into this working, you know, remotely, it took a couple weeks for them to get used to it, but now it's part of their daily life, and keeping it consistent has been fantastic for them and us as a family. But having a specific day, keeping it consistent is I think critical for a lot of students, because they have a day in class, and so this is their day just at home.
Thank you. I think we have Dr. Herring, and then Lori Morris, and then Ben Hammond. Okay.
Thank you. And I do want to reiterate that that challenge of the people who are fearful, but also the challenge of the families who are either employees or their students are at high risk for severe disease, and making sure that they have some alternative for education that might not be coming back physically to school, that is equal or equitable, I should say, to meet their needs. Obviously, the positive implications are the increased sociability and the mental health additions of being around other people. In terms of consistency, I just want to caution that we might be saying, okay, we're opening in a certain way, but then there is an outbreak or there are infections that actually need us to change course for a given classroom, a given wing, a given school, or the whole district. So really being clear up front to people that what we're doing is interim, whatever we're doing, that there'll be changes according to existing conditions.
Thank you so much. It's especially true with the possibility of rolling closures. Absolutely, great feedback. Lori Morris, I think, is next.
Yep. So I want to apologize. I missed some of that. The power went down in our house, and so did the internet temporarily. So I don't want to repeat anything anyone said. Apologies if I do. I would say that one thing I didn't hear earlier, and I think while the communication was excellent, that we might want to build in, and this goes towards positive and negative implications, but the feedback loop for communication, so that it isn't seen as ACPS telling everyone all the time, but figuring out ways to have constant iteration. So just as Steve said, things are going to change. So how do we keep that dialogue going and just be super transparent about that, so that I think if everybody are waiting for the one message, it's going to be a little bit more complicated. So keeping things super simple and constantly iterating on it, and being open and transparent with the data and what you know and don't know. And I think that just gives people, confidence in the system. And also that the school and the city, I think, have been amazing. And I've listened in on Kate's meetings. They're incredible. So having one voice from the city manager's office, the health department, and the school system would be fabulous. So this is not just ACPS speaking, but here we all are as a team. We're the leaders, and here we are giving that message out. So I think that would go towards, again, the confidence and avoiding the negative things that can happen. One of the things about a positive implication, and I'll stop there, of getting kids back in the building is, I think, the part of the success that the teachers do have with the distance learning in that short crisis period was that they already had relationships with the kids in their class. When people go back in, they don't know those children. So while we may have lost 25% of kids half the time this time, if you have no relationship with a high schooler or a middle schooler and their teacher, the motivation, the understanding of what they need and don't need would be tough. So getting kids back in school, at least for part of the time before we have to close again, hopefully would be great.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think we see Ben Hammond and then Ashley, Dr. Mann.
Yeah, I want to first echo what Mr. Ballas and Ms. Peters were saying in the chat around working in the 4 languages and making sure that communication is out there. My son is talking to me. And also watching those subgroups, I think that I don't know if this is too wonky or not, or too down in the weeds, but in a virtual environment like this, we lose some access to like anecdotal data and qualitative data, and now we're just in this one mode of data collection. And so the more consistent we can be in how we're collecting that data, the more we'll be able to capture more folks. And what I mean by that is we use things like student ID to connect data to, or STI or social security number. Those kinds of things, when we're collecting data, can make it really easy for data to talk to each other across different systems and across the city. So just thinking about how we're collecting that data will allow us to like meet those subgroups where they are and make sure that we're not missing anybody.
Great. And Dr. Mann and then Ashley. I think I saw Ashley made a comment in the chat. Did you have your hand raised, Ashley? She agrees with everyone. Okay, good.
I actually wanted to add to the mix as we're thinking about these, the need to potentially reduce numbers as we're focusing on the issues of safety and how to maintain social distance, given some of the challenges that come with, families that really do have children that cannot be left alone, that we're thinking that it may be possible to look at older children maybe being more apt to support a virtual learning experience. Certainly not in a very general way, but thinking about how schools can be used to spread out children who are in elementary school so that there's really an opportunity for families that are really going to be challenged economically speaking to contend with the level of inconsistency that might live around a reopening at a reduced capacity. Trying to think about that from a developmental perspective and where children are might help manage or be one frame to think about this idea of what a reduced capacity could mean. So I wanted to add that to the mix and then just note Dr. Herring's comment about anticipating that some people will not come back, and really, if we know that, making sure that there are resources for parents that do make the choice to not return and want to focus on addressing learning in ways that they feel equipped to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So as we move on to our third question, there are a few items in the chat just to make sure those are heard. The principals and teachers are strongly requesting alignment with other school systems in the city for childcare. Parents have questioned if their children span across grade levels, will there be a way to ensure all family members are on the same schedule? Being intentional to plan to ensure that any gaps in our subgroups do not grow no matter the model chosen. And then making sure that we have communication in our top 4 language, and then the consideration for potentially looping at the elementary grades, and respecting choices, no shame or judgment. So our final question for today.
I think Ashley might have her hand still raised.
Yes, I do. I could share it in the chat, but I just wanted to say from the elementary side, there was a huge concern about the fact that the students that did receive technology didn't necessarily use the platforms in the classroom during the year before going out and being asked to use these platforms. And so a push is that if we do return to school, that there's a time period for students to learn the technology, especially with the language disparity across some families, so that they have a resource that they can use in the event that we would close again. And I know that just kind of, it may stem across all grade levels, but really in the elementary side, I mean, those students are trying to even learn some of their letters and some of their reading. So they definitely need the extra attention to understand the difference between learning in the classroom and learning on the computer virtually. Thank you for letting me share.
Of course, thank you so much for sharing that. Our final question for today: what internal and external factors will help guide and inform our decision-making process on when and how to reopen schools?
Well, oh, I'm supposed to.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So obviously the external factors will be what is going on in the community? What's the community spread? How many infections are we having among subpopulations, among staff, among bus drivers, subpopulations of staff? And how does that influence how the schools reopen? I think it's really important that we also be very explicit about all the things that are going on in the country as well right now. Those factors that are going to guide and inform us with regards to being very open, being inclusive. And, the city's made a lot of, well, there's a meeting tonight, for instance, there's a lot of work at the city level and different agency levels, but ACPS being very explicit about the issues of injustices and how we as a society need to approach those injustices.
Thank you. Kate Garvey has her hand raised. Kate?
Yeah, I would say, I think that's the external factors are difficult. Excuse me. The pressures to do different things. And I think that we're all struggling with that, where a need, that kind of contradicting myself, but the pressure to say we've got to take this action because of these reasons. And I think it's really important for us to say across the city that we're making decisions based on good data that is really reflective of our whole community, and that when we decide things, we can justify them, but also, as was said earlier, that we're continually assessing the success of that or the effectiveness of that decision, and that we're openly talking about when things are not working, just as that was talked about, that we have pressure with the information that we have this very day, and the next day the information can be different, but that we say these are basic values that we're trying to operate under, and these are the strategies that we have decided upon, some tested elsewhere, others that we've come up locally, but that we're honoring these things for our students and their families. And I think that our ability to support each other when things don't go well is really, really important, where we are not justifying a poor decision or not hiding something, but actually saying, together we're doing the best that we can, and this is what we're focused on. And I think because I do feel this next phase is going to be even more difficult because of the level of fear and uncertainty. And so it's going to be important for us to be supporting each other, and also having the community be a driver, be at the table all the way as we're doing this. I'm not giving specifics, I'm sorry, more like a sermon, but I just feel like it's our working together is key. And that's the internal strength, I think, of our work.
Thank you so much for that comment. Dr. Hagrave?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. I think that we're struggling with some of the questions, obviously, at NOVA, just trying to figure out how do you strike that balance between providing the right kinds of safety protocols that people will believe and trust in so that they do feel more confident about coming back, with the opportunities for students and faculty and staff to come back to the learning environment. Students don't get further behind. And so certainly we're looking at CDC guidelines, we're looking at health department guidance, any mandates that might come from the state level, but recognizing too there's a tremendous amount of pressure to reopen as the economy continues the pressures on the economy continue. We know that we have to be a part of that equation, but a question for me and what we're dealing with is whether or not we will have some teachers and staff who may feel like they can't return, either because of their own health situations or family members. And so what do we do in those circumstances where we don't have the staffing in place to fill those gaps, or how do we plan for that, if there's a way to plan for that? So that is a big unknown, but I think it is part of the factor, one of the factors that has to be looked at.
Thank you. And we just have a couple of items in the chat that I do want to make sure are seen or heard from Dr. Crawford. A critical piece of our return needs to be the conversations about race and inequities, as well as having significant time planned for social, emotional support and relationship building. It can't be a typical return to instruction and must support mental health for students and staff first. And then from Ben Hammond, very true, specifically two larger inequities are impacting rates of contracting COVID and will likely impact a variety of other things like employment and mediated by access to health services, all external factors that will impact access to and participation in school. And I do see in the chat, we have Lori Morris. Oh, excuse me, with her hand raised, Lori Morris.
Yes, I think we know all the a lot of the external factors, including BDOE is going to, I presume, regulate some of this, give the SOLs, the grading, the number of hours, the number of days you have to comply with. You know, especially right now, I think as people were saying, it's not just the schools, it's whether or not parents have places to go that right now they're being funded and they can stay home. What happens when they have to go back to work? So is there a coordinated effort? I think going back to the health, the city, the rec department, you know, if the kids aren't in school, where are they? Can we work together to really look at that? If the kids aren't in school full time, do we have the capacity to make those plans this summer to balance out if parents aren't working, or if they are working, if different pockets of the population are more affected than others? I think deciding as a team across all those agencies, what are the metrics you're going to use? And, you know, actually laying them out so that every day you're not saying, well, the new metric is in and, you know, what are we doing with that? That may happen and you're going to monitor them constantly. But if you're really clear on the kinds of things you're going to look at from the get-go, it's almost like a dashboard that will morph and that you'll be on constantly. But then you can speak with one voice. We're all looking at this together because actually it's going to take the health department and the city and the schools to reopen. So I think that might be a nice communication thing, as well as help make the decision. And then from the school system, I mean, I'm sure you all have to be sure that you have the space, that the teachers are there, the equipment. The curriculum is not really, if you have to go into distance learning again, it's not really written as a distance learning curriculum. So I don't know how you start to plan for that. The kind of do no harm and best you could do in a crisis probably isn't good enough when you go back to school. So I don't know, thinking about that. Can you pay teachers to work in the summer? Getting those feedback loops from everybody. Equipment, how do you get all that equipment? So I'm sure there's a lot of just technical, boring details that have to be worked out. But I see it as a whole city, like the city working together, not just the school system. And I think the more you push that forward, the better decisions will be made.
Thank you so much. I think Justin Wilson, Mayor Justin Wilson has his hand raised for comment.
Yeah, thank you. You know, it seems like in some ways this is you know, one of those tough decisions we always have to make is around when snow is happening and when we reopen schools and how we reopen. This is like a snow decision from hell, right? This is taking but many of the same factors in a lot of ways, right? You know, we're looking at the city as a social services, or sorry, the schools as a social service provider for our kids. We're looking at the schools as an education provider for our kids. We're looking as the schools as an employer. And we're taking all of those roles the schools perform on a daily basis, splitting them up and figuring out how we accommodate them and how we balance them with the other factors. In the case of snow, it's safety because of, you know, all the things that go on in a snowstorm. But in this case, because of the public health concerns, I think that, you know, and I think it was mentioned earlier, and I would just echo it. One of the most important factors as we go through this is we're going to have to coordinate with our neighbors. We're going to have to coordinate with the Commonwealth. We're going to have to coordinate with the region. This is a decision that we have to obviously accommodate our specific local concerns and the nature of our student body, but we can't do this alone. Just like when we're doing snow decisions, you know, as some of the folks who are on those early morning calls can speak to, you know, you guys are all coordinating with all the other entities in the region. We're going to have to do the same thing as we make this decision, because we're not an island here, you know. So many of our staff live in other jurisdictions, rely on transit, rely on all the things that are going on in this region. And I think we're going to have to make these decisions mindful of what's going on everywhere else. You know, it's just as important what OPM is doing as it relates to the federal government and what their expectations are of employers, many of whom are parents in our system. You know, it's just as important what our small businesses are doing. Those are all factors that need to be considered. And I think what the region is doing and what our fellow school systems are doing has to be in this conversation.
Very good. Is there any, Emily, there's some comments in the chat. You want to read those?
Yeah, we have a few in the chat from Dr. Hutchings, just reiterating the importance of metrics. From Pete Ballas. We also need to consider our staff's fear of returning. Are they willing to return to classrooms, or will fear prevent them? And by that, he means valid fear, prevent them from returning. And then an agreement from Ben Hammond to say that, I wonder how staff actually feel about returning physically, what specifically might be their concerns, and it would be valuable to know. From Dr. Mann, I do wonder, given the level of uncertainty, if it makes best sense to think about virtual, especially given comments about curriculum, and then look at where there's a need to focus on subgroups, given the reality of disruptions, because staff make the choice not to return or parents make the decisions to keep their children at home. And then the final comment, again from Ben Hammond, is the potential internal factor. I wonder how the students feel about returning physically as well. And with that, I believe that wraps up, unless there are hands we can't see, I believe that wraps up the discussion from question number 3.
Emily, I have one more.
Dr. Herring.
Dr. Herring has his hand raised. Yes.
Yeah, and it's based on what Benjamin Hammond said, and just really for everyone to be aware of the stigmatization that might occur, because some subpopulations live in overcrowded housing, might be or are more heavily impacted in how that might play out, and what can ACPS and partners do to prevent that stigmatization or mitigate it.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Thank you.
Very good.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, and this is Tammy. In some ways, you know, the question of people, and every business is having to deal with this. This is not just germane to the schools. Every business is having to contend with the fact that people may choose not to come back. And we need to be prepared for that and be thinking about that as a part of the strategy. I can't imagine the schools are going to be in a different position. There are laws that protect and grant leave under circumstances of exposure or not being able to access childcare. There are laws now that every business has to adhere to. But those laws don't protect people indefinitely. And the choices that people are going to make around this, regardless of what we put in place, if there's an overriding fear, whether it's rooted in a condition or not, people are going to make those choices. And so really trying to process and figure out how to understand what that landscape looks like needs to be considered.
Thank you so much. And if there are no other comments, I think it's okay for us to go ahead and wrap up today's discussion.
That's good. Turn to the next slide. Okay, so first we want to just begin by saying thank you so much for your, you were selected. Dr. Hutchins said we have to have a group of stakeholders who will provide us ideas, things to consider. Your tremendous expertise, your knowledge has really come through in terms of your responses. So really, I know it's been kind of a long meeting, but we intentionally wanted you to be able to give us some things to really consider as we work collectively, as someone said, as not only a school system, but as a school community. So thank you so much for your thoughtful and intentional and deliberate responses to those various questions. On this slide, we want to be sensitive of time because we're scheduled to try to end at 11:30. So we're running a little ahead of schedule, and that's great. But we wanted to just give anyone an opportunity to see if you have any additional reflections or recommendations. Anything that you just want to summarize before we explain and share where we're going with the next meeting and next steps. Any concluding comments, thoughts, or recommendations?
I just want to reiterate what Tammy was saying. I think she's right. People will make their personal decisions about whether they or their children should return, so that you don't have control over that. But in terms of sharing information and communicating with them about what is being done to provide the best safety precautions that can be provided, just sharing that information repetitively, I think goes a long way in helping to squelch some of those fears. Just knowing that there is a proactive effort to look at the situation we're in and to do everything that can be done to protect both the folks who are coming into these facilities every day. So a lot of it is information, I think, that will help for some. Some won't come back. And I think you're right. There may not be an answer for them, but you can only address, I think we can only say what is going to be done to create the kind of environment that would encourage people to want to come back.
Absolutely, thank you. I see Clint, and then Danita and Perrette have their hands raised. Clint.
Thank you, Terry. I think this is an extension off the last comment in terms of as we think about these individual decisions that both families and staff are going to be making, should we be in a place of reopening the physical buildings of school, I think we have to acknowledge and realize that these are going to be emotional decisions, and that to the extent possible, we need to think deeply about how we create the experiences for staff and families prior to having to make a final decision to alleviate concerns as much as possible. I think information dissemination is absolutely critical, and it's a first step, but when making emotional decisions, we know that those decisions are made off of experience, both past and present. So things like, you know, if we have criteria set for a safe return to school, what does that look like? And inviting parents in for a mock day or period or half day, or having staff come in and having them go through an experience and provide feedback. So I think we really need to think about experiences as well as information.
Thank you. Danita and then Perrette.
From an academic standpoint, I was just listening and I had a thought about, I know Wi-Fi towers were set up in those communities that are low income, and having maybe like learning centers in those communities as well, to support those students that are not engaged and are not able to get on virtually, having some spots where they're able to engage with some educators or teachers where they're able to go through in their own community, a spot for them to have some engaging of a face-to-face instruction. And also some professional development surrounding in this virtual platform, providing teachers with some resources of how to check for understanding in this platform. I know that, you know, we're not grading on mastery, but as an educator, it's very important that that I understand that my students are actually getting the information. So having some professional development surrounding checking for understanding and actually having, you know, knowing that students are actually getting the material that are actually participating in the virtual platform.
Very good, thank you. Perrette, and then
I just wanted to say I'm thankful for this diverse perspective from the group of people that we're working with. As a building principal, I'm very confident just how we plan continuity of learning 1.0 and 2.0. As we head back to school for 4.0, our principals will be able to lead in open schools based on whatever plan that we have, and be very confident that we have a strong plan in place to continue the work that we've done. So thank you to this diverse group. We're going to do some good work. So thank you.
Ditto that. Great work. Priyan?
And I just wanted to comment what Danita had talked about with having like satellite places. Someone from Shiloh reached out to me and said that they have a zillion meeting rooms and they all have internet access. And did we need to use their space for internet access for kids to bring their computers? So it just reminded me that Shiloh reached out, Alfred Street reached out. They have huge spaces with internet access. So that's a great thing you mentioned. And yeah, we need to look at that, maybe using other places than just the schools. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's everybody. There were some, go ahead.
Dr. Herring does have his hand up.
Dr. Herring, okay.
Yeah, I just want to throw out that there's other external issues that need to be considered for the families that want their students to come back to school. And I had petitioned Virginia Department of Health based on a conversation I had with Neighborhood Health's Dr. Khan to waive the necessity, for instance, of having a physical exam that is required for certain grades, I guess. And apparently that's a Department of Education requirement and VDH doesn't have any control over it. Of course, we're still wanting to have children or students have all their vaccines that are required. But the problem with that is that even to this day, there's many practices that are not open. So there's going to be a lot of challenges of actually meeting of parents meeting the requirements and really thinking through, beyond the health, but what are all the other requirements that take to get students into school that we have to do differently. Is something we really need to start thinking about now.
Thank you, Dr. Herring. Emily, I think that's everyone, right, with our hands raised?
I think that's everyone.
That's everyone, yeah.
There was one other thing I did notice that popped in the chat from Lori Morris. The question of, is there an opportunity to redefine roles for teachers not wanting to return? And then from Dr. Hutchings, immunizations not being met could lead to other pandemics, I think. And then from Dr. Hagray, I thought create a virtual learning community for parents to help them understand planning for reopening and continued learning. And I believe—
Sorry for the typo. Sorry for the typo.
That's okay.
That's okay. We worked through it.
Yeah, we'll work through it. Okay, so if you just glance at this slide, just quickly, and Dr. Hutchins mentioned this earlier, but we wanted you to be aware of the next meeting. We'll continue the discussion with 3 additional questions. And as he indicated, we will send you some reading materials along with this presentation, but we'll send an abstract of those significant pieces of commissions and various reports that are essential for our next level of work. You can also see on this slide the future meeting dates, again, with the goal of getting to the board meeting on June the 26th. So our next step then is, as we go to the last slide, right, and we purposely, Dr. Hutchins said, we really want to have a great quote, right? So, and many of you have already alluded to this idea of teamwork. The great notion of teamwork is that you always have others on your side. And this morning is really an example of that we are working collectively to be able to strategically and deliberately think through the reopening of schools in Alexandria. So thank you for your comments, your ideas. Then I want to turn it over to Dr. Hutchins to close us out.
So one, I just want to say thank you all for giving us your time. I know your time is precious, especially now. And I just want to say, we have to do our best to not go back to how things were. I think our biggest challenge ahead is trying to have people have a paradigm shift in what our new normal will look like, because we gravitate towards what we know, and what we know is not going to be what we will become in the next few months. And I think that's going to be a challenge for us all. I think we're going to have to be real about the social and emotional challenges that people are going to have from this pandemic. I mean, I believe that new phobias are going to be created because of this, in regards to people not wanting to touch certain things and not wanting to leave their house and not, wanting to go into a school building or to a bathroom or to a cafeteria, so many things, or to touch a doorknob. There's so many things that I think are going to occur that we really just need to be mindful of. And I hope that we will continue to have this really robust discussion as we move forward. One final thing, if those 3 questions for our next meeting, if you begin to talk to just some of your colleagues or constituent groups or staff members about those questions, you can come back with just some perspectives of other people. That will be very helpful to us. And all of this information will be posted. So the goal is that, we talk about over communicating. We're going to be finding a way to post this PowerPoint presentation, the readings that we're giving you all, so people in the community can follow along with what we're doing as well, and can see the resources and things that we're using to make our decisions, and the people we're utilizing to make our decisions as well. So I just want to thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day. Please be safe, be healthy, and I hope you will stay informed with ACPS at ACPS at Home, which is our website with a plethora of information for you all to follow. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.